All right, everyone. Good morning, good evening, depending on where you are. I'm very excited for today's workshop, and I'm very excited to see you all back. This is the third workshop in our series. Today we are following or exploring network science and social media. Before we get into this lecture, we're going to go over our rules once again. Reminder everyone, out of respect for our lecturer and respect for the other participants in our group, we're going to make sure that we keep our microphone muted and that the chats we put into our common chat area are related to the content that is currently presenting. We want to make sure we have our cameras on, that we're showing our faces, that we're showing interactive spirit, we're all involved. It just makes the whole process more fun and exciting for everyone involved. So if you can, please go ahead and keep your cameras on. We'd love to see you. Another thing, we send 2 forms into the chat in each session. We send a attendance form, which has just been sent by a member of the HerWILL team, where we collect who's been attending these because we want to make sure we understand who our audience is. And towards the end of the session, we send a feedback form. Now, I'm going to remind everyone to please fill out the feedback form. Your input is important to us. We want to make sure we have these sessions improve every single time you come in, and we want to make sure the content is catered to what you want. And we can't do that without your active input. All right. And everyone, please respond in the chat that you've heard me, that you understand our rules. Okay, thank you. So we have people responding. Remember, during this lecture, you will be prompted to respond in the chat. If there's any questions, go ahead and leave it there. And then hopefully, as Tejas has time, he'll be able to answer them. If not, towards maybe the middle or the end, we may ask you guys to direct questions for the end. But for right now, please be interactive and active in the chat. Okay, we can go ahead and get started. So everyone, welcome in. Today we'll be following network science and social media. We have such an exciting guest joining us today. So this is Tejas Santanam. He is a lecturer at the H. Milton Stewart School of Industrial and Systems Engineering at Georgia Tech, and currently serves as a research engineer for the autonomous company called Beat. He holds a master's in analytics and a bachelor's in industrial engineering from Georgia Tech. And as you guys know, Georgia Tech is a close partner of ours, and we are very thankful to have them here. So if everyone could please direct their attention and respect and interest towards Tejas, I'm very excited to see what he has for us today.
Yeah, thank you for that introduction, Yasmina. Hi everyone, I'm Tejas, and I'm really excited to speak with you all today and share with you all a little bit about network science, and specifically as it pertains to social networks. So I don't know how many of you all have heard of the network science field before, or maybe have actually done some work in this field, but regardless of your familiarity with network science or social media and these kind of things, we're, I think, all going to cover some really cool concepts today about how these interact. And so the first thing that I kind of want to ask you all is, what is a network, or what is your understanding of a network? Many of you all maybe have heard the word network in different contexts, but what does a network mean to you, or what do you think a network is? And feel free to put your response in the chat. Okay, someone's saying that connects, right? Okay, so something based off of connections, some nodes and edges. Okay. Very nice. Yeah, these are all great responses, and these are all absolutely correct, right? And so we'll touch more on kind of how it works structurally, but yes, it's network science is based about the studying of networks, studying these things and the connections between different kinds of things, right? Including this network that we have here on the screen, right? And so this is a data set that was collected of Facebook users at Northwestern University here in the US, right? And the nodes, right? The nodes that are like the dots on the screen represent people, and the edges that are the lines connecting these different dots, these represent friends on Facebook, right? And so the interesting thing here is that we have it almost looks like these two different blobs, right? In this network of Facebook users at Northwestern. Does anyone have an idea or a guess as to what these two groups or these two communities or these two blobs represent on the screen of Facebook users at Northwestern? Feel free to take a guess in the chat. It's okay if you're right or wrong. It doesn't matter. But what kind of people are in each of these two groups, do you think? Does anyone have an idea what this big group here represents? The one with a lot of dots in it. Okay, so someone says users with the most frequent logins, someone says younger generation. And these are kind of both true in a sense. So actually, this is really interesting. What these two different communities represent are this big group over here is the students. So these are students at Northwestern University, and it's really big because there's a lot of students and they all follow each other. And this separate second group that's doesn't have a lot of connections to the main, larger group over here. The second group here at the top is actually the faculty and staff at Northwestern University, right? So they tend to be maybe older and they tend to, have friendships and relationships amongst themselves. But of course, maybe it's not appropriate for the faculty to be friends with the students on Facebook, or maybe they just don't have that kind of relationship or that kind of connection. And so that's actually the meaning behind this, right? It looks like dots and lines on a page, but actually you can look at a structure and identify just based off of, without knowing anything else, just based off of who is friends with whom on Facebook, you can actually look at and see, hey, who are the faculty, who are the students, and identify this. So this is just one small example, but it shows the potential of how you can use network science. So you can actually apply quantitative methods to do this analysis and understand some of those social dynamics and patterns in social networks, both on social media and in real life, the real world social relationships that people have. And in general, so network science is a larger subfield that analyzes any kind of network, right? So today we'll be doing a lot of examples and talking specifically about some things regarding social networks. But beyond social networks, you can look at things like, we can use network science to look at, can we predict how blackouts can roll through a country, right? So electricity and power lines, if a power line goes down somewhere, what parts of the country, will lose access to electricity, and how are they interconnected? Criminal networks, business networks, things like, interconnected products on something like, Amazon. If you're buying, maybe if you buy bread and then you also want to buy jam, right? And these items are interconnected and people buy it a lot. So in terms of marketing, you can use network science. Physical networks like road networks, or public transit networks. These are all examples of places where you can actually apply network science to understand how things interconnect and the importance of these connections, and so on and so forth. I see a question in the chat. So Facebook connection users, is it open to the public, and how can you see such a network in your area? So for the Northwestern example specifically, that was a segment of a data set that was collected through some sort of study. So it's not something that is public open access that you can download and see in your school or in your city or in your area, who's friends with whom. So that was like a specific study that was done. But if such a study is set up, this is definitely something that you can collect for sure. That's a good question. Thank you. So we talked, earlier, and I asked you all about, what is a network, and you all had some great answers, and essentially got at the heart of it, and which is a network is a graph that is composed of vertices and edges, right? And so vertices are these kind of circles, these dots on the screen. The edges are the lines that connect the vertices. So vertices, or you can also use the word nodes. Vertices, nodes are the same thing, and you can say these interchangeably. And so these nodes represent people, web pages, places, etc. They represent things. And edges, another word for which is links, again, you can use this interchangeably, represent connections between the nodes. So for example, if it's people, maybe it's, friendships or relationships, like your family and so on. If it's web pages, it can be if you're on a web page and you click a link to take you to another web page, the clicking of that link represents the edge that connects these two web pages. If it's places, the links could be roads, right? You can drive from one city to another, right? So then the cities would represent as nodes and the roads would be the links in that setting. So that's all a network is at a high level. Is just as long as you have nodes and you have links, you have a network. But there's different types of networks, right? So one type of network, a common type of network, is something we call an undirected network. And we call it undirected because these are represented by mutual relationships. And so things like, classmates, friends, relatives, spouses, these are mutual relationships, right? If you are married to someone, they are also married to you, right? So these mutual relationships can be represented in a graph like this on the right, where you have some nodes and you just draw a line connecting it, saying, person one and person four are connected, right? And it's bidirectional. You can also represent this kind of network with a matrix, like so. And so if you look at the first row of the matrix, this represents for node one, the connections that it has. So we put a 0 if there's a connection, and a 0 if there's no connection, and a 1 if there's a connection. So from node 1 to node 1, there's no no link to itself. So we have a 0. However, node 1 has a connection to node 2, right? There is a link between node 1 and node 2. So we put a 1 there. Similarly, in the second row, this is from node 2's perspective. Node 2 is connected to node 1. So in row 2, column 1, we put a 1. However, node 2 is not connected to node 3. So in row 2, third column, in this position, we have a 0 because there's no connection between node 2 and node 3. So we can represent this like a matrix. So you can do mathematical operations on it as well, in addition to having the graph, in addition to having the picture. Does this make sense? The undirected networks concept? Let me know in the chat if this makes sense or not. Someone's asking, is this discrete mathematics? Absolutely. So discrete mathematics is at the foundation of network science. So understanding nodes and edges, a lot of these pieces come directly from discrete mathematics. Later on, we'll look at some specific analysis techniques that are unique to the network science subfield that were developed more recently in the last 20 or 30 years or so that build off of these kind of discrete math foundations. Absolutely. Great question. Okay, so this is okay, so someone said, could you explain the matrix once more? Absolutely. So in here, you look at any node. And so if you have a node, you go to the corresponding row in the matrix, right? So if we want to look at node 4, for example, we go first, second, third, fourth row. And we'll say this fourth row corresponds to the fourth node. And then we look at the columns for the connections to the other nodes. So we say fourth row, first column represents the status of the connection between node 4 and node 1. And because there is an edge, there is a link connecting node 4 and node 1, we put a 1 in that place. Similarly, node 4 connects to node 2. So in the fourth row, second column, we put a 1. However, node 4 does not have an edge connecting to itself, right? There's no kind of self loop there. So we put a 0 because node 4 connects to nodes 1, 2, and 3, but not to node 4 to itself. So we put a 0. So wherever there is a edge or a link, you put 1. Otherwise, you put 0. Does that make sense, Sarah? Great. Any more questions on this page? Okay, I'll move on for now. Let me know if anything doesn't make sense at any time. So just like we have undirected networks, we have directed networks now, right? So directed networks is where the direction matters. These are not mutual relationships, right? So examples are links from one web page to another, right? You can, maybe on some news site, there will be a link to another news story. Does not necessarily mean that the other news story will link back to the original one. Citations, if you're reading like academic papers or journals, you might, if you take some evidence from another place, you want to put a citation, doesn't necessarily mean that the other paper also cited your paper. or following on social media. For example, on Instagram, I can go and follow some celebrity. Does not necessarily mean the celebrity will follow me back, right? There's some celebrities that I follow on Instagram, and none of them have followed me back, sadly. So this is an example of a directed network, right? It's in one direction. I follow someone does not necessarily mean that they follow me back. It's not a mutual relationship. And so you can see here on the right, this picture of this graph, there are arrows, right? So node one still connects to node two, but it's in an arrow. So maybe node one, that person follows person two on something like Instagram, does not mean that person two follows person one back. So we have an arrow representing the direction of that relationship. So this matrix here, we call this the adjacency matrix. This adjacency matrix has similar logic with the rows and the columns, right? So the first row corresponds to node one, and we say, hey, node one has an edge outgoing to node two and an edge outgoing to node four. So we put a one in those places. However, in the second row, representing node two only has an outgoing edge to node four, so we put a one there. Even though there's an edge connecting node one and node two, it is incoming, not outgoing. It's not, someone that node two follows. Node two does not follow node one, right? Node one follows node two. And so that's why there is a zero here in the second row, first column. So in the directed network, you place the ones based off of if there's an outgoing edge. Does this make sense in how we generate this matrix? And does it make sense understanding directed networks? Great. Awesome. So these are the foundations. Once you have this, everything we do will build off of this. So after undirected networks and directed networks, there's a couple more types of things that we have to understand, which are unweighted and weighted networks. So weights represent intensity of connection. So you can apply this on either undirected or directed networks. So connections on unweighted networks are represented by 0 or 1. You don't even have to put a number. Basically, if the edge exists, it's a 1. If the edge doesn't exist, it's a 0, just like in the matrix representation. And this can be, are two people friends on some social platform like Facebook, right? Like that mutual relationship, either you're friends or you're not, right? And so it's like a binary 0, 1 kind of weighting. Now, on weighted networks, this is where there's some kind of intensity where there's an actual number. You can see here, there's an example with a directed network where there's numbers like 7, 5, 2, 4. These numbers are attached to the edge, to the link, right? And this represents the intensity of that link, the intensity of that edge. So this can be, for example, how many times have you liked someone's posts on social media? So here, node one, this person one, has liked person three's posts 2 times. Person three has liked person two's posts 4 times. Person two has liked person's one posts 5 times, and person one has liked person two's posts 7 times. And then in the matrix, instead of 1 or 0, like we have learned, you would actually put in the weight corresponding to that edge. So normally we said if the edge exists, you put a 1. But now if there's a weight, you don't just put a 1, you actually put the weight of that edge. And if there's no edge, then you put 0. Does this make sense? Unweighted and weighted. Okay. If that makes sense, I'll keep going. And so we don't have to go through all this practice, but which of the above could represent undirected networks? We'll just go through this quickly. Let me know your vote in the chat for figure A here. Is this an undirected or directed network? Undirected, great. And what about for figure B here? Is this undirected or directed? Okay, I see directed, absolutely, right? Because we have the arrows, right? And then it's no longer a mutual relationship. Now this one is maybe a little bit more tricky. So no worries if you don't get it, and I can explain it after. But for figure C, is this undirected or directed? See, I see some people saying directed, and absolutely, it's directed. And here's why, right? If you look at the second row, third column, there's a 0. So basically it's saying, hey, there's no connection between 2 and 3. But actually, if you look at the third row, second column, there's a 1. So what this tells us is that there is a connection between 3 and 2, but not between 2 and 3. And this can only happen if it is directed, right? Because otherwise, if it was undirected, it would be mutual, and there would also be a 1 here. So very well done, great work there in a quick practice. And so there's another slide of practice, which you all can come back to this recording, do it on your own. In the interest of time, I'm going to move on to some of the next concepts, but you can do some more practice here along those lines. The next concept that I want to talk about is the idea of degree. So for undirected networks, essentially, to be simple, the degree is the number of nodes that some node is connected to, right? So the example here, the degree of person 5, we represent degree with the letter K. The degree of person is K equals 3, right? Why? Because it's connected to 3 nodes. Node 5 is connected to node 1, to node 2, and to node 4, right? So we could say, hey, person 5 is Facebook friends with person 1, person 2, person 4. That means that their degree is 3. And let me ask in the chat, what is the degree of person 4 or node 4? What is the degree of person 4? All right, I see 2, absolutely, right? So degree of person 4 is 2. Why? Because it's connected to person 3 and to person 5, right? There's 2 connections. They have 2 friends here in the social network, right? So degree at a high level really can help you understand. It's one of the most simple measures, but it can also be, a pretty important measure of importance, right? If someone has, 1,000 Facebook friends, perhaps they have more influence or more importance in social media than someone that has only 2 friends, right? Again, it's an oversimplified measure. It's not always accurate or the best description in all contexts, and we'll talk more later about some other metrics that you can use for kind of judging importance and influence. But degree is a really simple measure to kind of get an idea of importance, right? Now for directed networks, degree is a little bit more complicated. So degree as a whole is still the same. It's the number of nodes you're connected to, whether incoming or outgoing. However, we also have kind of 2 sub-measures called in degree and out degree, where in degree is a number of nodes that a node is connected to that have an edge incoming. So basically the number of incoming edges is the in degree. Out degree is the number of outgoing edges. And then degree is just the total number of edges that you're connected to. So it's the sum of in degree and out degree, right? And so, for example, we say here for person 4, the in degree is 2 because we have an edge from 1 to 4 and an edge from 2 to 4. So we have an in degree of 2, but we also have an out degree of 2, right? Because we have an edge from 4 to 3 and we have an edge from 4 to 1. You can see these little arrowheads there. So in degree is 2, out degree is 2, right? And so degree is going to be 4, right? 2 plus 2, because it looks like there's 3 edges, there's 3 lines, but actually this one here is a bidirectional edge that it counts as 2 because it's in 2 directions. We can draw it as 1, but you could also draw it as 2 edges if you want, 1 incoming, 1 outgoing. So the degree of node 4 here is 4. Similarly, for person 3, there's only 1 edge incoming. So the in degree is 1 and the out degree is 0 because there's no outgoing edge. So there's a question in the chat. This can be compared to Instagram followers. Absolutely, right? And so this is like the number of people that follow you and that you follow, right? So in the Instagram context, your total degree is a total number of followers in terms of both people that you follow and people that follow you, right? The people that you follow is your out degree because these are connections where you're reaching out, and the number of people that follow you is your in degree, right? And so, for example, someone that has a really high in degree, right, like a celebrity that has millions of followers, maybe like, Cristiano Ronaldo or Lionel Messi or, one of these famous footballers, they have a lot of followers, right? Um, we can say, hey, they have a really high in degree, and we can also take that to mean and say, hey, they must also be really important, right? Because, no one is going to give me like, 100 million followers on Instagram or something like that, right? So I'm not that famous. And so we can use this as kind of a relative measure of judgment in social networks to determine who is important, right? And then we can say, hey, these people are important. These people have influence. These people can be, social media stars, social media influencers. So we can use these kind of network science tools to really help us understand, even at a basic level, even though it may seem like common sense in some cases, like who's famous and who's not. This gives us a mathematical approach to understand that. And so then average degree, I know there's a mathematical formula on here, but average degree at its simple level is basically you take the degree of every node, you add it up and you divide by the number of nodes, right? So like if you have you know 10 nodes, right? And we say, maybe one node has degree 2, one node has degree 3, one node has degree 4, so on and so forth. We can sum all those degrees up, divided by 10 because we have 10 nodes, and whatever that number is our average degree, right? So if we want to look at a group, maybe we could take everybody here in this call, we could add up our social media followers, divide by the number of people in this group, we would get an average degree, right? And this can give us some rough measure of like how famous we are. But of course, if you take like, I used the example of footballers earlier, we could take some famous football team and we could find all their followers. We could sum up all their social media followers and find, divide by the number of players on this team and get an average degree. And probably theirs will be higher than ours, right? Because they are super famous people and, they have a lot of followers on Instagram or whatnot, right? So we can use average degree as kind of analyzing in separate groups and separate communities how important are they on social media. So, that's some of the basics, but today we're here to talk about network science and social networks specifically, right? And social networks are studied extensively as part of network science. It's one of the most important and most pertinent application domains for network science methodologies, right? And so we want to understand some of these questions like how far apart are two people in a social network, or how influential are certain people or relationships in a social network? And we can do all of this with these techniques. And so maybe some of you all have heard this phrase before, but there's an idea called 6 degrees of separation. Have any of you all heard of 6 degrees of separation before? This phrase or this idea? See, someone says no, no. It's okay if you haven't heard of this. So there's a phrase that okay, I see. Yasmin has said yes. So okay, some people yes, some people no. Um, but it's a phrase that has been said where the idea is that any two people in the world are at most 6 steps away from each other in the broader social network, right? So for example, today I'm meeting you all, now you know me, right? And maybe I have a friend who's somebody, and that friend has a friend, and that friend has a friend, and basically, if you go by, friends of friends of friends, within 6 jumps, within 6 steps, like a friend of 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 a friend, you can reach any person in the whole world, right? This could be, you know, I don't know, the president of the United States. This could be, um, you know, Cristiano Ronaldo. This could be, you know, Shah Rukh Khan. This could be like whomever, right? You could have any celebrity from any part of the world, or even any remote person. You could have some person who's, just a random person who maybe only has a couple of friends, and they're not very social and they're very introverted. That's the idea, right? And so this phrase was said, and some people claimed like, hey, 6 degrees of separation. And there were actually experiments done to verify that these kind of social networks have very short paths, right? That we are very interconnected. And so the first one was the Milgram experiment, it was called, in 1967, where this researcher named Milgram, what he did was he sent letters in the mail here in the US, and all it was basic information like, hey, I want to send this letter to John in New York, or like, John Smith in New York, you know, whatever. That's it, like very basic information, no specific address, and just put it in the mail, right? And sent it to like some random part of the country. And they tracked like the people handing off the letter, like, like, I don't know John from New York, but I have a friend that lives in New York. Let me send it to them to see if they can figure out who John is and so on. And so they tracked this, and the median path length was actually 5, and the mean path length was around 6 for the letters to actually reach their destination. Some people didn't go through with the experiment, but for the people that actually went through with the experiment, um, around 5 to 6 steps or hops, to find some random person in some random city in the US. And so this validated that conclusion. Now, of course, with social media, social networks, we're all the more interconnected. And so more recently in 2012, some researchers did a study on Facebook and found that among 721 million users, that the average path length, the average distance between any two users among the 721 million people was 4.74 hops. So literally within like a friend of a friend of a friend of a friend, you could reach any person on Facebook, right? Which is pretty crazy. And I personally find pretty cool, right? And these people, they use the network science methodologies to trace these connections through the network to figure this out. And they replicated this many times, and it really illustrates this concept we call the small world property, right? Where you can have a super, super large network with, millions of nodes and millions of edges, even billions of nodes, billions of edges, but you can still get from any node to any other node in quite a short distance if you follow the right path. There's a nice game, these slides, I think might be sent out later, but even if not, you can also, Google the Wikipedia game. Basically, it gives you starts you on some random page in Wikipedia and gives you another random page and says, hey, you have to get from this Wikipedia page to this Wikipedia page in this other Wikipedia page in the smallest amount of clicks possible. And it's a really, really fun game. And you have to try and get from like random pages like photosynthesis, to McDonald's or something like this, and connect and click just all by clicking on links in Wikipedia. How can you go? So it's a kind of a fun game, but it's also an application of network science in action. There's also an idea called 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon in the Hollywood movie industry here, where like two actors can be connected within 6 steps of this actor named Kevin Bacon. And so there's another link here you can explore and try it with different Hollywood actors and actresses and see which other actors that they acted with and which actors those other actors acted with and so on, and see how many steps within you can connect different actors in Hollywood. So that's another link there as well. It's kind of fun, kind of like a game, but it's a real world application of network science in action. And so then there's an idea of friendship networks. So friendship networks are basically, given some amount of people in a room, how many possible arrangements are there of mutual friendship, assuming a person does not form connection with themselves? So here, given 7 people in a room, how many possible arrangements of mutual friendship are there? And so this is an open question to you all, for those of you that may have some familiarity with combinatorics or this kind of background. You might be able to answer this question. If you're not, it's totally okay. But I'll give it a second there if anyone here is able to answer this question of how many possible arrangements of friendship are there, right? With 7 people, like person 1 could be friends with person 2, while 2 is friends with 3, 3 is friends with 4, or just 1 could be friends with 4, but the rest of them don't have any friendships, or they could all be friends, or some could be friends. So how many arrangements of friendship are there with 7 people? I'll give a second if anyone wants to take a stab at it, and if not, that's okay. Okay, so I see someone saying 7 choose 2. Okay, so that's the right track, absolutely. So that's the first step, right? And so the total possible number of edges is 7 choose 2. There's 21 possible relationships. However, we want to know the total possible networks, right? All the configurations of these relationships, right? So there's 21 potential edges, right? Links in the network, right? So any time that you have this kind of number of nodes, you can get the total possible number of edges by just doing a choose 2, right? So you do 7 choose 2, we get 21, but the 21 edges can either exist or not exist, right? It's like a binary thing, right? So either that friendship exists or doesn't exist. So for these 21 potential friendships, we have to do 2 to the power of 21. And we actually end up with over 2 million possible networks. So if you have 7 people in a room, you can have over 2 million different ways that these 7 people can be friends, which is pretty crazy. And we'll come back to this in a second, right? And so we have like, 40 something people in this room. Just imagine how many configurations that is. And so in friendship networks, you have different people that may be friends with each other. Um, and so, you know, we look at a high degree node like Tom, right? So Tom has a degree of 4 because Tom is connected to John, Pam, Bob, and Nancy. And so if we choose a node at random, Tom has the same chance to be picked as everybody else. But if we choose a link at random, Tom has a higher chance to be picked because Tom is connected to more links. And so for these kind of nodes, we call them hubs. Hubs are essentially high degree nodes, right? So high degree nodes we call hubs, and they're often nodes with major influence in the networks. And hubs make the small world principle that I talked about earlier possible, right? Someone who knows a lot of people and has a lot of connections allows us through these people to find connections to other people, right? So that's where social media influencers come in. They have a lot of followers, a lot of people who want to hear what they have to say. And so maybe companies that want to market their products, they target these kind of influencers, right? And these hubs, these influencers, right, are then able to spread their influence via their many, many connections. So I see someone asking a question, hubs and broker are different, right? So, sorry, what is broker? Or help me understand what you mean by broker. Communication medium of 2 people. Yes, yeah. So it's not the medium. Hubs are the people themselves. So we call somebody or some node a hub if they're a high degree node with major influence and connections in the network. So, this is an example in, a social network. But for example, you can also call things like airports hubs, right? Like very busy, popular airports that people fly through. Like here, I'm in Atlanta in the US. It's the busiest airport in the world. And so we can say Atlanta is an airport hub because people can go from Atlanta to a lot of other places in the world. So yes, good question. Great question. And so there's actually a funny thing called the friendship paradox, where the average degree of a node is some number. Here in this network, it's 2.29. But the average degree of the neighbors of a node, so for example, by neighbors of a node, I mean, for Nancy, that would be the average degree of Mary, Tom, and Bob. The average degree of the neighbors of a node is greater than the average degree of a node. So there's actually something called the friendship paradox that says that our friends have more friends than we do on average. So this is actually kind of funny, but it proves out mathematically that your friends on average have more friends than you do. And the reason is kind of what we were talking about in the previous slide, where if you are taking the average degree of the node, you pick a node, you're picking a node at random, essentially. But by averaging the degree of the neighbors, you choose them by following links. So, if you want to find the degree of Tom, we look at Tom once. But if you want to find the average degree of Tom's neighbors, they're each connected to Tom. And so Tom is counted multiple times. And because Tom is a hub, Tom is high degree, the average degree of the neighbors gets inflated. So the more hubs there are, the stronger the effect is. So this is a paradox. So it's meant to be a little bit confusing and counterintuitive. But it's something I wanted to share that I thought was funny is that mathematically, your friends have more friends than you do in any social network. And so we talked about friendship networks earlier with 7 people. Um, And I'm building up to a point that I want to illustrate, which is like, even let's look at like 30 people in a classroom. Here we have, a little bit more than 30 people in this room, so it's actually even more. But even for 30 people, how many possible friendship networks are there? So again, we do 30 choose 2 to find the total possible edges, which is 435. And then for the possible networks, either the edge exists or doesn't exist, we do 2 to the power of 435, which is a really, really, really big number. Now, scientists have actually studied this, the total number of atoms, right? The tiniest building block of the universe, the total number of atoms in the whole universe is estimated to be between 2 to the 158th power and 2 to the 256th power for comparison. So this blows my mind. This is when I found this out, I was shocked, but it's true that just with 30 people in a room, there are more possible configurations of friendship than there are atoms in the entire universe. Is that does let me know in the chat. Do you all find that interesting? Cool. What are your thoughts on this? Is this a cool fun fact? Someone saying yes. Yeah, to me it was shocking when I found it out. But it's there. But this causes a problem, right? In that we cannot study any, for 30 people, if this is a problem, imagine like something like Facebook or Instagram where you have millions and millions and hundreds of millions of users. It's impossible to study the whole real world network just by looking at all the possible configurations, right? You can't do it. It's not possible. So this is why we need network science, right? This is why network science is necessary because we don't have time to look at something where there are, more than there are atoms in the universe. We need to look at higher level metrics and quantitative methods where we can measure the structural aspects of the network. So here we kind of identify the problem and we see that network science is the solution. And so one way that we can look at the structure of the network and identify, importance and centrality in a network is with a measure called degree centrality. So there are different types of centrality. There's many, many different types of centrality. I'm only going to present a couple today in the interest of time and kind of serving as an introduction. But we have degree centrality. So degree centrality of a node in a network is basically you take the degree of a node and you divide it by the number of nodes minus one. So let's say that there are 15 nodes here, and the Medici family node. So this is like a data set connecting some familial relationships from Italy, almost 600 years ago. And so degree centrality essentially represents what fraction of other nodes are you connected to. So there's 15 nodes here, but there's 14 other nodes from the point of view of the Medici node, right? 14 other families, and they're connected to 6 of those 14 other families. So we say they have a degree centrality of 0.43. You can calculate this for everyone else, and it ends up that, the Medici family has a higher degree centrality, and so we can say, hey, they're probably more central or more important to the social network than the other families are. However, degree centrality can miss how well connected a node in a network is, right? So for example, node 5 here has a degree of 3. It's connected to node 7, 6, and 4. But node 4 only has a degree of 2. However, it lies in a crucial part of the network, right? So someone on social media might have relatively few links, but they could lie in a critical location in the network, right? Maybe, if this is a social network, we're talking about social media accounts, maybe node 5 could be something like, the BBC or some popular news service that has a lot more connections. And node 4 could be someone that has less connections, but maybe they're an important reporter, who maybe they're on the ground in, a war zone and reporting on some critical matters. They may have less degree, but without them, the BCC or whichever, kind of big news organization cannot get the news, cannot get the reports. And so we can say that, hey, even though, the social media account of node 4 has fewer connections, has a smaller degree, we could argue they are more important, right? Because of where they are in the network. So how can we tell the story of this node? And so there's another measure called closeness centrality, which measures how easily a node can reach the other nodes. And so all you essentially do is in the numerator, it's the n minus 1 nodes, right? So all the other nodes divided by the, you sum up the shortest path from that node to every other node. And so this seems a little bit complicated. I'll show an example. And so we want to calculate the closeness centrality of, for example, persons 1, 3, and 5 in this network. For node 1, we can look at the shortest paths from node 1 to every other node. So we say, node 1 to node 5, shortest path is 1, right? Just one hop. To node 2, shortest path is 2. To node 3, 1, 2, 3 hops. And so you add all this up, right? We get 8. We say there's 4 other nodes, and we can say 4 over 8, closeness centrality is 1/2. And you can repeat this process for every other node, and we can see, hey, person 5, has the highest closeness centrality of 4/5. And we can see, hey, they are very central in the network. Both node 1 and node 3 have a degree of 1. So they would have the same degree centrality, but node 1 has a higher closeness centrality than node 3, right? 1/2 is greater than 4/9. And this is understandable because node 1 is closer to a very central node like node 5. It's 1 hop away, whereas node 3 is 2 hops away from the most central node, which is node 5, right? So in a social network, we can quantify people, not just how many followers do they have, but who do they follow and where are they in this network? Something like closeness centrality can capture that and allow you to understand importance more than just followers, right? But also how influential are their followers, how central are they? And so you can have a more nuanced and complex understanding of of a social network and importance in this way. I see a question of why V not equal to U. Basically, you don't do the shortest path from any node to itself. We're talking about other nodes. We're saying for a node V, we don't want that to be the shortest path to itself, if that makes sense. Great. Okay, I want to keep going in the interest of time. Another measure is the idea of clustering. This is another measure. So one super fascinating aspect of social networks is how tightly clustered they are, right? So for example, the extent to which, a person's friends are friends with another is kind of one facet of this, right? So we can say, for example, I is a person here below, and I is friends with J, and I is friends with K. And we want to understand in the social network, are J and K friends with each other, right? Sometimes you may have multiple friend groups, right? Where your friends don't know each other. Or sometimes maybe you're all part of one friend group where your friends do know each other. And so we have a measure called clustering, which essentially helps us measure anytime you have this kind of triangle that is not closed, what is the number of times that this edge actually exists? How can we measure the number of transitive triples a node actually has? If we have this kind of 3-node group here, we call it a transitive triple. How can we measure this number of transitive triples that actually exists relative to how many it could have, right? So in some cases, this won't exist, and so we want to measure that. And so that's what we call it the clustering coefficient. And there's this fancy formula here, but that's all that it's doing is measuring how many times is that, transit triple closed as opposed to not. So how many times are, 2 of your friends actually friends with each other? And then there's the average clustering coefficient, where you add up the clustering coefficient for every node, you divide by the number of nodes, and you can kind of get an average picture of the network. And so if a node does not have more than one neighbor, their clustering coefficient is 0. Otherwise, you're going to get some value based off of this, right? So I have some friends, that I know from my hometown where I grew up. I have some friends now where I live in Atlanta. They don't know each other, so those are not closed. But also I have, some groups of friends here where my friends do know each other. And so in those cases, those transitive triples are closed. So clustering helps you measure those your friends' relationships and if they are also friends. Any questions here at a high level in terms of understanding the concept? I'll describe this later. There's, code packages and ways that, that can easily give you these measures in one line for networks. So you don't necessarily have to sit and calculate this by hand, for like something the size of Facebook or Instagram. No one is doing this. They're doing this with code, and I'll touch on that a little bit later. But you can calculate these kind of measures. And so there's some practice here. Again, in the interest of time, I'll move on, but you all can come back and check your understanding of, looking at friends, the possible friends of friends, right? And then the actual friends of friends that exists. Like for example, for node 3, it's connected to node 4 and node 5. So 4, 5 is a possible friend of friend that doesn't actually exist. However, node 3 is connected to 1 and 5, right? But 1 and 5 are actually friends with each other. So that's an actual friend of friends. So you take the actual friends of friends, divide by the possible friends of friends, and you get your clustering coefficient. So, there's 1 over 1 here, so it's 1. 1 out of 3 possible, so 1/3. Again, here, 1 out of 3 possible, so 1/3. And so that's how you do it. I see a question in the chat. Can you repeat what that pipe operator V means? So this is the size of the set of vertices. Essentially, it's the same as n, the number of nodes. So this is just another notation that just means the number of nodes. So you can also use n to represent this. It's all one and the same. So just you divide by the number of nodes. Does that make sense? Great. Okay. So these are some kind of measures we've talked about to this point, degree and measures of centrality to understand how important are certain nodes. Now, another thing that we can do in social media is looking at communities, right? You have a huge network, there's different sub-communities, right? Maybe you're part of, a group of tennis players on Facebook, or maybe you're part of a group of, classical music fans, on Reddit or any other kind of social site. And you're part of communities. So communities are sets of tightly connected nodes, also called clusters, right? Where all people, maybe they have a common interest or they're a really tight-knit common friend group. And maybe they have a few connections to other groups, but not really, right? Like that's not, they're not all one big group. There's some kind of separate distinction. But then those other groups are also very interconnected within themselves. And so, for example, on something like Twitter, people with strong political preferences, maybe they follow people and are friends with people who have the same political preference as them. And, they're not friends or following people who have completely opposite political preference, right? And there's many examples of this. And so why do we want to study community? So we can see the organization of the network. We can classify common nodes and say, hey, I know that you like, classical music and someone else looks to be in the same community as you. I think they also would like classical music if they're connected to you. So we can do some targeted advertising or something like this, right? A business can look at this and say that based off of, your social media activity and preferences. You can also find missing links, right? You can say, hey, maybe I'm just joining a social media site, right? And I only have like 1 follower or 2 followers. But those 1 or 2 followers, maybe they are, football fans. So even though I've just joined social media and I have not a lot of activity or data that I'm giving the company, like Facebook or something, Facebook can, give a recommendation to me, hey, you might be interested in joining, this interest group about football, or you might be interested in, becoming friends with these other people who also like football because I'm connected with people who are part of that community, right? So community detection is really important. And there's many, many algorithms to do this, right? So there's a lot of, algorithms used to identify quantitatively where are their communities, who is in what community. I'm only going to present one today in the interest of time. And it's called label propagation, where the underlying principle is that neighbors of a node usually belong to the same community, where if you're connected to someone and you're all tightly knit, most likely you're in the same community. And so the way it works is you first assign each node, right, each person to a different community. If you have 100 people in your network, you start off with 100 communities where each person is in their own community. And then you go through the nodes one by one in random order, and each node takes on the community that's the majority of their neighbors. And you do this until you go through all the nodes, and then at the end you have your community. So we'll see this in action in a second. It sounds very simple, but it works really well. So here you can see this figure here where we have 6 people, right? And we can see visually, it looks like there's a community here on the left and a community here on the right, right? These 3 people are connected. These three people are connected. And, person 2 and person 4 know each other, but the larger groups as a whole are not integrated, right? So there's 2 separate tightly knit friend groups. And let's see if label propagation algorithm can identify this, right? And so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We give each node its own community. And then we go one by one. So we go to node one and we say node one needs to take the community of the majority of its neighbors. So it's connected to a community 2 and a community 3 node. And if in case of a tie, you pick a random one. So in this case, we pick 2, right? Then the next node we go to is this node 3, and we say, hey, it should take on the majority of its neighbors. Both its neighbors are part of community 2. So we say, okay, that node is also going to become community 2. Then now we go to this node over here, right, that we haven't visited yet. And we say it's connected to 2 nodes that are part of community 2 and 1 node that is part of community 4. So 2/3 of them are community 2. And so we say, hey, this node is part of community 2, right? The majority community is community 2. And then we go the next step, we randomly go to the next node here, which is the one with the 6 on it. And again, there's a tie, right? The 2 nodes it's connected to, one is community 4, one is community 5. And so we have it choose a random label. And so between the two, it randomly picked 4. And then we go to node 5, there's node 5 here. And it should take on the majority of its neighbors, node 4, sorry, community 4. So it's also going to take on community of 4. Then last but not least, we come to this node here that we haven't visited yet, but 2 of its neighbors are community 4 and 1 of its neighbors are community 2. So we leave its community label to be 4. And so now we're done. We've gone through each node at least once. And we end up, you can see, hey, community 2, community 2, community 2, community 4, community 4, community 4. We did it, right? We correctly identified the communities. We identified this friend group on the left, this friend group on the right, with this quick label propagation algorithm that is 6 steps, right? And again, like I said, you can do this in 1 line of code via a code package I'll show you later. And we'll get this to you in like milliseconds, less than a second, right? And so we went from every node in its own community in a few short steps to the appropriate definition of the communities in terms of how we would understand it. Is that cool? Let me know what you think in the chat. Label propagation, does it make sense? Do you see how powerful it is and how it can be used to identify communities and networks? So of course, small example here, but you can do this in even a larger network, like all the people in Instagram or all the people in Facebook or all the people in Facebook or Instagram in a certain area. You can do this kind of analysis. And of course, there can be many, many, many more communities, right? Not just 2, but you can do this to identify communities within this kind of setting. So I see a thought, can these metrics or some variants be used to analyze airport flights data as well? Can see some similarities there. Absolutely. So I actually teach, at Georgia Tech a network science course where it's like 40 hours of instruction as opposed to this kind of quick setting that we're doing today. And they have projects and things. And many of my students have done projects in the past where they analyze airports and flights and where should they add flights or where should they remove flights or the kind of performance of this network or what are the important airports or which airports tend to fly flights to one another and on which days and whatnot. So absolutely, this is many many airlines or any airline I would imagine has someone who's doing this kind of network science analysis. And so you can we're using social networks as an example, but these pretty much the exact same methods and algorithms can be applied. Even though the interpretation might be different, you can apply these to really any other domain. So I see someone saying, yes, it can be complex when the nodes grow. And it's true, it can be a little bit more complex. And in general, for community detection algorithms, they get harder and harder when you have more nodes. But for label propagation specifically, it actually works very fast because you just need to go through every node once and do a quick check. So of course, it's not necessarily the same speed, right, as if you would have 6 nodes. But compared to other algorithms, label propagation specifically converges after a small number of iterations, fairly independent of network size. So label propagation tends to be one of the ones that are less complex and faster as the number of nodes go because it's parameter free and simple to implement very fast. So actually, for networks that do have millions of nodes and links, label propagation is one of the best ways to partition those networks into communities. So great question and great thought and kind of builds right into this where we can see the efficacy and how effective label propagation is. So that's community detection. But again, moving on to another kind of network science topic for social networks. We've seen, these measures of centrality for importance and influence. We've seen community detection for identifying sub-communities in social networks. And now we're going to actually look at dynamics in networks for information diffusion. Right. So networks are critical to the diffusion of information, right? We may buy a new phone because a friend has bought one and they tell us, hey, it's a good phone, you should buy it. We may discover a piece of news because a friend tells it to us. Friend might say, oh, hey, did you see the football game last night? So and so team won. Or, did you, see this latest movie that came out with so and so actor, right? And that's how we become aware of it because someone tells us, right? So there's this social contagion element where individuals' opinions, beliefs, ideas can influence what you think, what you tell other people, and you based on how you were influenced, you can also in turn influence others in the social network, right? Influence your neighbors, right? If you're thinking of it from a nodes and edges standpoint. Um, and the kind of standard setup of models of influence or information spreading in network science is you have a certain number of nodes that are influencers that are initially activated, right? Like maybe a company goes to a node to a person says, hey, I'll pay you to promote my product on social media, promote my product on Instagram, right? Make some Instagram reels about my brand of juice or something like this, right? And then every inactive node that's not an influencer is either activated or not according to some rule. And by activated, I mean they're influenced or they're adopted, right? You see an Instagram reel where some influencer is advertising a brand of juice and it makes you thirsty and you go buy this brand of juice, that means you're activated. Or you see the reel, but you're not influenced, you're not interested, you don't buy the juice, you're not activated. So, there's going to be some model or some set of rules that determines how the influence spreads and to whom the influence spreads. And that the influence spreads a lot and the influence passes through and activates many people, right? And we can talk about this in social media terms as like something going viral. In network science terminology, we call this a cascade, right? It cascades through the network and activates, a large number of nodes. Now, cascades can be smaller, where it's only a handful of nodes, or they can be a major proportion of the network, like a global cascade, right? If you look at 2 years ago, something like ChatGPT, people were not really using large language models. OpenAI was there and they had some kind of basic text models like the Da Vinci model and whatnot. But all of a sudden, like in the last, 12, 13 months, ChatGPT exploded, right? And even people who don't come from a technical background have been using these things day to day. And so we can call something like that, like the awareness or usage of ChatGPT to be something like a more global cascade than something that's maybe like an adoption of a local juice brand in some part of the world. And so here's an example of it at work, right? There's this gray node in the center. These red nodes are influencers and they're trying to influence. So their nodes based on their connection. And then this middle node here is convinced, is influenced. They end up buying the juice from the Instagram reel, right? But how do we model this, right? How can we apply this quantitatively? And so there's a class of models that we call threshold models. And so what we say is a node can only be activated if the influence exerted on it by its neighbors exceeds a given value. So every node has their own threshold, right? Maybe you're more likely, maybe some of you do your ideas and your ideas for shopping from Instagram Reels. Maybe you see interesting things and you're like, I want to buy this, I want to buy this, I want to buy this, right? And you're very easily influenced. You have a low threshold for influence. Or maybe some of you are never influenced by advertising. Maybe you never click on the advertisement. You always, click the X and put it away. Maybe you never buy anything you see on social media. You have a higher threshold. So different nodes have different thresholds. And we talked about, weighted networks earlier, right? Based on the weight of the links that you're connected to, right, from influencers. If that's above your threshold, you're going to be activated. If it's below your threshold, you're not going to be activated. And so you can do this based on, an activation condition theta, right, that represents, or, the activation condition that's, personal to you, your threshold. And if the influence, the sum of the weights on the edges connected to you is greater than your threshold, you're influenced. If not, you're not influenced. You're not going to buy the juice. But if it's above the threshold, you're going to buy the juice like this. And so there's also a fractional version where it's like maybe the fraction of the people you're connected to is your threshold, right? Like if 50% of your friends, buy some type of new phone, maybe you'll also buy a new phone. But until it reaches 50% of your friends, you're not going to buy a new phone, right? Maybe you don't have this number in your head. Maybe it's not a rule, but maybe you tend to have some pattern, or we can model it in this way, right? Or maybe if 50% of your friends want to go see a movie, you're like, okay, I will also go see a movie, right? But if only 20% of your friends wanted to see a movie, maybe you'll do something else instead. Maybe you'll go eat some food at some restaurant or something instead. So you have some kind of activation condition, right? So we can say a common one is, theta equals half. At least half of your neighbors have to be active for the activation condition. So we can see an example here where we have a network. So let's take that theta equals half. We'll take this fractional threshold of half your neighbors have to be influenced for you to also be influenced, right? Half your neighbors have to, be drinking this new juice brand for you to want to drink this new juice brand. And so let's say the juice company says, okay, node one is my influencer. I'm going to pay node one some amount of money to drink my juice brand and to tell everyone about it, right? And so if the threshold is half, then we can go in order, from node one to node two. Node two, are half of their neighbors activated? Let me know in the chat. What do you think? Are half of node two's neighbors activated? All right, I see someone saying yes, absolutely, right? Half is activated, so then node two gets activated as well. What about node three? Are half of node three's neighbors activated? Right now that one is activated and now that two is activated. Yes, exactly, right? So one, two, and three, they're all influenced, they're all activated. They have adopted this brand of juice, right? Now, what about node four? Node four is connected to node five and node one. Have they met the threshold for half? They have, right? 50%, right? So node four is also activated. So now someone tell me for node five, you can give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down or yes or no in the chat. Let's go quickly. Node five, is it active or no? Yes, great. Active, yes. What about node six then? If five is active, does six become active? I see someone saying yes, no, maybe. If five is active, so six is connected to both seven and five. And so if five is active, six becomes active. So if it's half, you break the tie. So the threshold is, greater or equal to the threshold. So it's a greater than or equal to. So since we have met the criteria for half, six becomes activated. So then does seven become activated if it's connected to six and one? Yes, right? Because seven is connected to eight and nine also, but it's connected to six and one, which are active. So seven becomes activated. And then eight is only connected to seven, so it becomes activated. Nine is only connected to seven, so it becomes activated. And like this, we have reached a global cascade, right? Now, granted, global in this sense is a small network with only 9 nodes, but we have managed to activate all the nodes, right? So the juice company did a good thing. All the juice company had to do was persuade person one. And in turn, because of the threshold, everyone in this group, all 9 people, were persuaded to adopt the juice brand. So this is how social media marketing is done. This is how social media influence is done, right? And we can use network science to model this, right? So they can run these simulations beforehand to see how is it going to spread, who should they spread it with, and so on and so forth, right? And that who should they spread it with is a critical question because hubs are usually very effective influencers, right? So we talked about hubs being these high degree nodes, these people with a lot of followers. But just because someone is a hub, just because someone has a lot of followers, does not necessarily mean that they are a good influencer, right? It's important to be in the right position in the core of the network. And here's what I mean. Let's say instead of node one, which had a degree of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's say the juice company wanted to make person 7 their social media influencer, right? Person 7 has a degree of what? So let me know in the chat. What is the degree of person 7? 4, I see someone saying. Yes, absolutely, right? A degree of 4 for node 7 connected to 9, 8, 6, and 1. So it's still a high degree node. I would say it's a hub, right? It's a hub just like node 1 is. But what happens if we activate node 7 as our juice social media influencer? Well, we said earlier, node 8 and node 9 are the only ones connected to node 7. Without a threshold of half, they're going to be activated. Node 6 is connected to 7 and 5. And so exactly half is met. And so node 6 also becomes activated, like you see over here in figure B. But then what? Can we activate node 5? Exactly, no, right? Because only 1/3 of the nodes are activated. What about, can we activate node 1? No, right? I see some nodes. Yeah, exactly. Because node 1 is degree 5, but only one neighbor that's active. So 1/5 is less than 1/2. So I mean the threshold. So 1 cannot become activated, 5 cannot become activated. So the cascade stops. We don't achieve a global cascade. We were able to influence 3 other people, but we are never going to be able to influence the people here on the right side just by influencing node 7. So then you have to start over, and the company has to spend more money to try and influence other people. It wastes them time, it wastes them money. So it's really important, right, that these companies do these network science simulations to figure out who to target, right? So it's really important, critical, the choice of influencer, right? It's not just arbitrary. Just because someone has a lot of followers does not mean they'll be a good social media influencer. And you can see why here. Influencing node 1 caused a global cascade. Node 7 was more limited, right? We only influenced a few people. Any question here? Does this make sense? Is this fun? Is this cool to see how this works? Interesting, cool, good, good. Glad it's making sense. Glad you all are enjoying it. So, like I was talking about, knowing the structure of the network allows us to control the evolution of a cascade, right? So sometimes small cascades can be large by activating a few carefully chosen nodes, right? So you can pick certain social media key influencers to spread your product, right? And do the marketing for it, or does not even have to be a product, it can be an idea, right? If you're looking at politicians, right? And politicians are, maybe they're talking to certain people and going to certain cities, or they are giving certain interviews, right? Or they are saying certain things. It's all about this, right? It's who can they activate that will then spread their message to other people, right? And if they do it wrong, they're limited in their influence. So this is all about how viral marketing works. So this is, really important in terms of that social media piece. Now, there's also times where we talk about we want to get a global cascade. There's also times where you want to actually limit the cascade. So for example, if you're thinking about electricity, right? If the electricity goes out in your home, you don't want the whole country to be without electricity because it cascades, right? And so you want the structure of the network to be in such a way where maybe node 7 has a blackout, which causes a blackout in node 9, 8, and 6. But then the rest of the country, rest of the people can still have electricity and can be fine, right? And so where you put certain key points in the electrical network, where you put like the transformers and this kind of equipment, and how you handle the distribution of electricity, again, follows these exact same methodologies, but the opposite. You want to control the cascades such that it doesn't spread everywhere. So it's kind of funny. They use the same principle, but they want the different outcomes there. There's also a class of models called independent cascade models. So threshold models are based off of, number of people or threshold or influence. Independent cascade is just one-to-one working. And so basically the way it works is a node has a probability that they convince their neighbor. And they get one shot. You get one chance to convince your neighbor. Maybe you're trying to have an argument with your friend. right? And you're trying to convince them of some idea. And either they believe you or they don't. And if they don't believe you, that's it. They're stubborn, their mind is made up. It's just one chance. Um, and so you can see how it works here. Like node one has an idea and it tries to spread it. And it convinces node five, convinces node two with some probability P. Maybe it's a strong idea, an 80% probability. Or maybe it's like a crazy idea. They're trying to convince people that, I don't know, that they have like 10 legs or something like this, right? And no one is going to believe them. It could have a probability of like 0.01, whatever it is. And they try to convince the people. So one convinced five and two, but could not convince three and seven. Then in turn, five tries to convince six, and two tries to convince three and eight. And five could not convince six, two could not convince eight, but two could convince three, and three tries to convince four, and it works. And then you end up with this, right? The thing here is that this is probabilistic versus the threshold models are deterministic, right? The threshold models we can simulate, we know how it's going to work each time. Here, we don't know how the probability will play out. I could run this scenario again, and maybe this time, like, you flip a coin, right, with some probability, maybe one convinces three and seven, but one does not convince five and two, and then you end up with a different result, right? So it's a little bit more complex. And a lot of times in the real world, there's this probability. And so, you know, marketers spend a lot of time looking at a lot of interactions, trying to figure out how convincing is somebody? How good is an advertisement, right? You might see an advertisement on the TV or hear an advertisement on the radio, and some might be more convincing than another. And so they do all this kind of testing to figure out what is the highest probability, what is the most convincing advertisement, right? Because that way they can increase their probability of convincing because they don't know if you're going to be convinced or not. And so they try to do this, essentially an independent cascade model. Does that make sense? Does the difference between independent cascade model and threshold model make sense for you all? Any questions here? All right, seeing none, I'm going to move on. So again, this is what I was saying, is the differences between threshold model and independent cascade model that we talked about. And so we're coming to the end. So like I mentioned, I teach this course with about 40 hours of instruction at Georgia Tech talking about network science. And there's so many methods, so many tools and algorithms, unfortunately, and a little over an hour, we're limited in what we can talk about here. So I tried to present some of the highlights and some of the key concepts that at least we can talk about today and build off of each other. So we learned some basics about networks, right? What are networks, structure of networks. We learned about degree and measures of centrality, like closeness centrality, to identify how important or how influential are people in a social network. We learned about label propagation, how we can identify communities within a social network. And we learned about models of network diffusion to spread ideas and advertising, marketing through a social network. Now, network science as a field also covers many further social network analysis tools. Things like that we didn't cover today, things like link prediction, right? Like what is the likelihood that one person should or would follow another on social media, right? So using machine learning to identify, hey, based off of all these other people that you follow, who else can you follow or should you follow or might you follow? Also things like network attacks, right? I mean, in social media, there's also a bad side where people try to spread misinformation, right? And if you are, one of these bad people and you want to spread misinformation in social media, who can you spread misinformation to make the most damage? And how resilient are these social networks to these disruptions? And on the flip side, if people are trying to fragment your social network and destroy relationships, how can you structure your network in such a way to best protect against that? All of these things are facets that network science studies. Now, all these concepts that I talked about today, you could do it by hand, but understandably, if you want to analyze very large networks, millions of nodes and millions of edges, things like Instagram or Facebook. A great resource for network science coding is the Network X Python package, and there's a link here, networkx.org. It's open source and has a lot of functionality built in. So you can pass it a network and in one line run label propagation. And you can do like pass it a network and in one line get the closeness centrality of every single node in the network and so on and so forth. So network science, very popular. I highly recommend this package to do network science analysis for this. Can I give some names of popular and powerful AI models that are used to build recommendation engine analyzing network data? So there are types of models for recommendations, things like collaborative filtering algorithms, if you've heard of this, and so on, is really useful. Um, and Really, you can use any type of model. So when I teach my class, we even use for recommendation logistic regression, right? Like the binary type of 0-1 prediction with logistic regression to identify if a connection exists or not, right? And so it does not have to be very powerful or very complex. It can even be as simple as logistic regression, but all the way up to like Netflix for their recommendations have very powerful collaborative filtering algorithms that use some complex, low rank matrix methods and so on that they've developed over the years that you can look more into. If you Google it, I think they even have some blog posts about it that you can read about that. So it's really interesting. You can do this again at a very simple level, very complex level, very small scale with only 5 to 10 nodes, or at a large scale with millions and millions of nodes. But the underlying principles and methods are really the same here. But I highly recommend that you check this out because networks are all around us, right? Whether it's social networks, whether it's transportation networks, whether it's financial networks, or whether it's electrical networks, so on and so forth. They're all around us, and if you pursue this kind of field with data science or some kind of related domain, or applying those kind of skills in your studies or in your job or just for fun, you're going to have to work with networks or network structured data at some point. And network science is a great toolkit. And some of these algorithms and methods we talked about today are a great point for, understanding the structure of the network, understanding the key points and areas in the network. And, I hope you do pursue, network science and try to keep learning. And, I hope you practice and try some coding with Network X in Python and let me know how it goes and what you think of it. That's all that I had for today. Thank you so much for listening to me ramble on and talk for a little bit. But I hope you learned something about network science. I hope you learned something about social networks and got some cool facts. And if you have any questions, let me know. And yeah, thank you for your time. I think question, any course recommendation to learn network science. So of course, aside from, coming to Georgia Tech and signing up for my own course, I would recommend some. So in terms of online courses, I actually don't know if there's very many big ones, but there are some. I have some books here that I would recommend. One, I don't know if you can see in the camera. So this book might be there for online. It's called A First Course in Network Science. And I would recommend this book a lot. This book helped me a lot when I was first learning network science. Some other books, let me, pull out from my bookshelf here. Another book, and it's by a very famous researcher in the network science field. It's called Network Science by this author called Barabasi. This is another great textbook, and this one is there for free online and it has like some interactive examples and things like this. This one is a little bit more technically rigorous and advanced than the first course in network science. So if you want something that's a little bit, an easier approach, I would recommend the first course in network science. If you're looking for something that's a little bit more complex technically, I would recommend this Network Science by Barabasi. But anything you choose, you cannot go wrong. These are all, great resources where you can learn a lot about network science and continue to explore the field. Great question.
Does
Anyone?
anyone else have any additional questions?
If not, thank you so much for your time, everyone. I really appreciated the opportunity. And like I said, hopefully you learned at least one thing that you found interesting or cool.
I definitely did. They're dropping off the feedback form in the chat. Everyone, before we step off, let's all remember to turn our cameras on and smile at the video so that we can take a screenshot. So if everyone could get on camera, we'd greatly appreciate it. Okay, and our team is going to go ahead and take out the screenshot. Okay, Makadza, did you get it? All right, perfect. So we can go ahead and finish up for today. I greatly enjoyed today's lesson. Thank you so much, Tejas. It means a lot. Network science was really important to me, especially using it to finish up my thesis when I got my master's degree. It was a lot of network coding, so it felt good to see you today. Just kind of relive those original lessons. But besides that, everyone, please go ahead and fill out the feedback form in the chat. And once you fill that out, you are free to go. Thank you so much for attending, and I hope I see you guys at our next session. Thank you again, Tejas.
Thank you.
Okay, bye everyone.